Hey everybody, welcome to another day on the crazy train. And as you guys are ramping on, feel free to hit us up on the Q&A and use the chat to harass us. We've got actually some more stuff to talk about besides hanging chads or digital ones or whatever. We've actually got some stuff in from the IRS as well as from the SBA. More fun and frivolity in dealing with all this stuff. So, and whatever you do, just do not think about the final countdown. Whatever you do, don't get that song in your head. Do not think about the hair going all over the place with the bass player and the drummer and all that. Don't think about the final countdown, and we aren't thinking about it either. So Jack, since you were writing some lyrics last night on social media, do you have some comments before we kick it over to Adam?
Yeah, right. So just a couple things. We don't need to go necessarily into the details of what is supposed to be reported on these questionnaires, but the way I understand it is that there's actually two questionnaires or two kind of different assessments. One is business activity and one is liquidity. And so those are kind of two categories that go into the responses that are associated with that. And like I said, not going into the details of that. There's also, and I want to pull this up while we're chatting. Where are things as of a few days ago after the election that, in summary, my understanding is that Majority Leader Mitch McConnell wants to pass a stimulus by year end. And Democrats led by Chuck Schumer in the Senate say they've proposed totally inadequate solutions on the COVID-19 relief. So same stuff, different day, that really there is a desire to move forward. And I think now a lot of the politics of it, I shouldn't say a lot, some of the politics have been removed, I think, from it. And they're really focused on what is the number and how much, and where is it going to go? And all this, in prior discussions, we've talked about how there is just all this sludge that gets put into this, they call it pork, whatever you want to call it. But, and I actually gave you some examples of what was in one of the stimulus bills or proposals back in May, and some of the reasons why it didn't get passed or didn't go anywhere, at least on the Republican side of things. So, they're still kind of battling back and forth, but hopefully what we think will happen or thought would happen a couple of weeks ago when we're at this period now post-election is that they will focus on that, they will feel the pressure, and that they will proceed to move forward on the various things. And there was something else I thought was funny. So there was an article about Bernie Sanders becoming the Secretary of Labor, and that a lot of the potential cabinet is a lot of Obama people coming back in. So that's just to say that, are we going back to where things were in the previous administration? Who knows? And so a lot of speculation going around as to what might happen in the near future and into 2021.
Yeah, and I'll vent with Jack for a little bit on the questionnaire. First off, it came out as a, hey, this is proposed. Then it came out as a, you have to fill this out. Then it comes out as, hey, upon receipt from the lender, you've got 10 days to fill it out. But by the way, we're not going to offer any guidance on it. And, the borrower can't actually download the form from anywhere. They've got to get it from the lender. You don't really know what anybody's going to do with this. So I don't think we've had any clients. If we've got any clients that are on the call right now, I don't think we've had any clients that have actually received this form yet from a lender. I don't know if you have or not, Jack. I mean, everybody's done the same thing that we've done, which is just pulled it off the PDF version that got sent out by the Journal of Accountancy. But, it does seem like a lot of armchair quarterbacking in terms of the nature of the questions, and to then not offer guidance on, hey, what does any of this stuff really mean? You know, it's just, I don't know. If I was a lender, I would not be real surprised if they thought, since there is a clock associated with this called 10 days, it would not surprise me if lenders said, I'm not sending that crap out, you know, till maybe I get a application for forgiveness, you know, across my desk or something. So, you know, still a lot of questions about it, if it'll even stand at all. I mean, it further highlights you're not really incentivized to do anything for a period of time. Um, I did have one person ask the question, you know, are we better off being early in the gate if we're over $2 million? I don't, you know, that's a hard one because you're balancing, you know, the thought process that things will get somehow worse if you're later in the gate, or will somehow, you know, versus now probably it's going to be the same regardless of whether you're first in the gate or you're last in the gate. I don't really have a good answer to that question other than to say on the tax side, we get asked that question a lot around, hey, if I file early, does it reduce my chance to get audited? The stats are the stats, man. And the way they audit is the way they audit. So I've had returns that were audited that were on extension. I've had returns that were audited that were not on extension. The audit process is typically the same. And by the same, I mean totally freaking different because it depends on who the person is that's asking the question. Some people dive in the weeds and get stuck on issues and are extremely thorough. Other people are like, look, I want this off my desk and to be done with it. So to answer that question, if it's like an audit process that is done with the IRS, my answer to that would be, it doesn't matter if you're early or late, it's probably going to feel the same regardless.
And I think it goes back to also what we talked about is what is the purpose, the real purpose of going through the due diligence inquiries with these borrowers. And it is to basically say it's to find the people that had truly fraudulent intentions. And then I think there's another category of people of, it's not necessarily fraud from the beginning, but as it turns out that, well, three categories: purposeful, inadvertent, but knowing after the fact that there may be, like, maybe you weren't supposed to get as much money. There were some people saying, well, I got money in my bank account more than I was supposed to. And then kind of like a third category, which is the people that receive money and for whatever reason didn't need it or were able to sustain their businesses, for which would be, I think, a minority of the overall lending that went on from what I've seen. And so what those people that now have this bank account of money that is sitting there, what do they do with it? And so I think that that's been on the minds of some of our clients as to, well, you know, I thought I needed it. I sort of did. I was able to be better on the financials and getting through the pandemic, at least through now, but we don't know what's going to happen. So shouldn't we use that as a reserve moving forward necessarily? The money that we would have otherwise spent on payroll that now has been loaned to us, hopefully forgiven, but now the cash that we would have used at least partially for that purpose is sitting there. So it's a matter of perspective. I mean, it's dollar for dollar, but you know, what is the perspective of the money that you're holding? And so does it need to be paid back, et cetera? So I think that they're also looking for the people who don't really need it after the fact, which I think is not necessarily, I mean, it's a windfall and it was probably an unintended windfall, but nevertheless, it's money that's out there that's been given to people that didn't necessarily need it. Now, the counter argument to that is, well, why didn't they need it? Was it because they hustled? Was it because they were smart on cost cutting? Was it, you know, for whatever reason, so that they were able to preserve their assets, primarily cash, in order to create, I don't want to call it a surplus, a reserve, so that they wouldn't necessarily have to spend the stimulus money. So all kinds of things to be considered. And also, I think it informs what might happen with the next stimulus package as far as the rules with respect to when you apply for it, and then also moving forward, and what are the parameters in your ask? Like, what is your true need, and how do we measure that need between last year, between the first part of this year and the second part of this year? There's going to have to be integration and a catch up of reality as to then I think the next set of next ask of money as far as the application goes.
Yeah, and if you look at that third bucket, which again is the, hey, look, depending on the period that I'm looking at, I didn't necessarily need the money. To reiterate your point, Jack, that, again, if you just use us as an example, and I don't know if Shoemaker experienced something different, or you'll get fired for saying what you actually experienced. I'm just teasing you, by the way. Sorry to the Shoemaker bosses up there in the cloud. Our April was our April was 60% of what our April would normally be. And if given that moment, you had asked me, well, what are you going to do about that? We had a plan that we're going to execute that would have involved labor reductions. And we didn't do them because we received PPP funding. And the reason that we ended up getting paid was because a lot of our clients received PPP funding. So our damage could potentially be in the future oriented versus the specific 8-week window of time that we were looking at. So really, this is just fraught with messiness to go after people. If you think about, to sympathize with the banks for a second, what are they supposed to use this information for? Are they supposed to use this, as part of the decision-making process? No, you filled out the form and it's our judgment that you really shouldn't be forgiven of this loan. So therefore, we're not going to get reimbursed by the SBA. We're going to have a loan on our books that we don't even want, that's unsecured. It's like, it's a freaking train wreck. So anywho, I really got to hope that, and again, even if you receive $3 million, there's still a freaking surplus of 138 billion. Is that the number, Jack? 138 billion. B with a B. That's a B, not an M. That's a B. That still hasn't been distributed to people. So what was I supposed to do with it? It's not like I'm going to have, this is now me getting on my soapbox. Well, that's great. I didn't need my $4 million. So I would like to opt into the existing tax rate for now and in the future. Since I didn't take the money, I shouldn't have to take this back, versus Jack, who did take the money. He can have the higher tax rate. Thank you very much. I mean, we're all paying it back anyway. So that's why it's fraught with messiness. And I'll shut up now, Gary, now that I've embarrassed you.
Well, I just want to say one thing. Since we're disclosing the inside of our respective firms, I'll share this with you, all of you. So, one of the things that, and I think this is natural for any service provider that has money or budgets and for business development and marketing. So, one of the things we cut back on, well, we're not going out there in person and having dinners and coffees and lunches. We're not out there putting our flag on, whatever it is that we sponsor, just to have that, what I call the subliminally overt, the thing that you see that you don't readily register, but it's in the back of your mind until you actually need to recall it. So we're not spending money on that. So our expenses naturally decreased. So from looking at it at that perspective, our financials look better because we were able to decrease expenses significantly. And so to say that now we didn't need it, yes, from one perspective, it's but it was self-imposed regulation. So we should it goes back to the person the S corporation who had the owner had paid taxes on the distributions but kept it in there as for net working capital or whatever. Or I think I've disclosed to you guys, in some cases, one owner used it as just a savings account instead of investing it. And then when he's going through, did he really need it? Well, if he had pulled the money out earlier in last year as a distribution, then the cash wouldn't have been there. So yes, the financials would have shown that he absolutely needed it. But once you extract that from the formula, or once you include that, then the picture looks better, but it's artificial. And so, then it's like, well, he should have spent it or taken it out or done something with it. Similarly, it's like, should have others continue to drop money into these things just so, we can show the ability to have received all this money. I shouldn't say all this money, but received the PPP money that our firm did. And to show the need. I think that the view of the need has been skewed because we've cut back on expenses. And we have clients who have done that, other professional firms that have done that. It's just a natural result of the cutback, but it acts as potentially a penalty in this review process where we have to now disclose where the numbers are, which might look better than they would have otherwise if you had not or had spent the money. Kind of went around in a circle on that, but I mean, the point is that I think that by being frugal, that may be a penalty under this new reporting requirement in order to justify the forgiveness.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if I was to speculate, I think a good elegant solution. When I say elegant, it would suck because we might pay tax on it. But I think a good elegant solution to this would be potentially to say, look, we're going to allow the deductibility of the expenses, but to the extent that your retained earnings increased as a part of this process, which the implication of that would be, I got the money, but I didn't really need it. Therefore, it's sitting in retained earnings as a savings account. I could see them coming up with some form of taxation associated with that increase in retained earnings, factoring in distributions that were made that would have gone into that retained earnings. So they come up with like a, but for type of scenario. I mean, there's other places that's existed in the tax code, whether it was a repatriation tax that they just did, anytime you convert to a C corporation to an S corporation, there's a AAA analysis that gets occurred and built-in gains tax. I mean, I could see them doing something like that as a way to resolve both the tax issue and then also, why is it fair at all to say, hey, you didn't need the money, you got to pay it back? It's like, look, if that's the ultimate determination, frickin' tax me on it. That seems like a very fair solution.
Well, time will tell, won't it? Because the guys that make the laws, most of them have never run a company. So
yeah, they're all attorneys, Jack. Yeah, let's just get this straight. They're all attorneys, and they all managed to get significantly richer after being in office.
Yeah, it's a great gig if you can get it.
Yeah, that's right.
If you can hide the skeletons deep enough in the closet, wherever they're hidden.
Yeah. Oh man.
We could spend an entire webinar on what not to do during an election on that one, Jack. But anyway.
Yeah. All right, so we got some questions, and we actually even have a chat. I think I saw David on the chat. I'm not really surprised. We'll get into that in a little bit here, David. But this is from Robert, and I won't disclose his last name, but Adam, you'll want to know and look in the questions because you know him. He says, Adam, hope you're doing well. It's been a while. I have a client that got 135K in PPP. Should I wait to see if the amount for easy forgiveness goes to 150K? Heard that it might raise from 50 to 150K.
Yeah, this goes back to, I don't see the benefit of being first in the gate because that probably will change. I mean, the proposals were between 100 to 150. Yeah, there wasn't any magic answer why the SBA landed on 50. So I don't see why it wouldn't go up.
Yeah, the original intent, I think, was 150, and they thought that was a fair number. I think they threw 50 out there just to show that there was some forward progress and showing that at least 50 is de minimis. And so to say an extra 100K, because it's statistically, if you look at the numbers, it could be up to 3. And again, I don't want to misrepresent or modify anyone's expectations or create expectations, but you know, if you look at statistically, there is a large concentration of multiple loans in the lower range. And so, you know, it would help with the administrative burden of going through this, but there's also the risk of people saying, you know, again, after the fact now, that, yeah, I really needed it. I really used it for what I was supposed to use it for, going all the way back to, yes, I correctly applied for it. So you're making a reaffirmation under oath and penalties of perjury. I'm sure I haven't looked to see what the form exactly says, but you know, those US code sections, all those little symbols and stuff, that's usually what it means. Is if you lie, it means really bad things are going to happen to you. So
Right.
under federal law. And so, yeah, you just need to think about that as, but I think I think it will probably go up just for administrative ease. But I think that there may be more pockets, so ranges. So now maybe it's 50 to 150, 150 to 300, and there's layers of additional information, of due diligence of information you may have to provide to get past the gatekeepers of forgiveness.
This is probably the most interesting chat that we've received so far. I'll read this to you. So I was not familiar with Schrodinger's cat. Have you been familiar with that, Jack?
I am not, but I'm going to look it up.
It's worth Googling, but this is from this is from our friend David. This is a Schrodinger's cat situation. By observing the facts, they've changed them. Creating the PPP changed the economics for everyone and then eliminated the need for the PPP. And yeah, look up Schrodinger's cat, and it's SCHRO with umlaut DINGER's GER apostrophe S cat. And it's basically this, I mean, it gets into Einstein. This had to deal with Einstein discussions with this Erwin Schrödinger in 1935. I mean, it gets into quantum mechanics and quantum superposition.
Yeah, I'm looking at the same Wikipedia and apparently definition as you are, because that's exactly, I'm like, okay, whoa, very quickly got out of my area of expertise, not of interest. I mean, it's interesting, but of expertise, definitely.
I don't know. I almost think that he deserves a $25 Starbucks gift card from you, Jack.
You're giving away my money again. Actually,
yeah.
I gave it away.
Hey, just call me a governmental official. All right, Joe. Is there a political element to this equation now? Are we waiting for Biden to become official and provide total forgiveness? Oh boy, I don't know that I'm going to touch that one.
Well, I mean, there was bipartisan consensus that the proceeds should not be taxable in any format. I mean, that's still the case. Like, there's not been, to my knowledge, any member of Congress that voted on the CARES Act and said, nope, Treasury got that totally right. That's what we meant. They said the exact opposite of that. That's number one. Then number two, you know, the over $2 million was kind of an arbitrary threshold. And in my opinion, it doesn't matter if it's over $2 million or not. It's like, based on the fundamental premise that, hey, did you need the money or not? I would agree with David. It's like, well, look, I mean, you can't tell me that because you changed the rules of the game and then went retroactive. They'd be far better off just prosecuting the cases of flat out fraud, meaning like, you know, $20 million loan for a company that had $1 million in gross receipts last year. That, like, give me 5 seconds and I can come up with criteria under which you should start prosecuting people. Not what, you know, what did I know at the time when the world was coming to an end or what was my state of mind? So I do think that there probably is a good chance, you know, as good as chance as any, that since there is bipartisan consensus that they will, on the taxability piece, that there's probably a better than 50-50 chance that they'll just say, look, this is freaking nonsense. Go after the fraudsters, and we're done with it. Because if you think about it, there'll be a new head of DOJ. There'll be a new head of the Internal Revenue Service, which is, the Department of Treasury, which is making the interpretation of the rules at this point. New head of the SBA. I mean, I don't see it getting any. And when people have said that, they're like, oh, what's going to happen? I don't see this getting any worse. I mean, Biden has said over and over again, we got to help out our small businesses, get the economy moving too. He just has a different idea on how to do it. So I don't see this getting a whole lot worse, especially because when it comes to the stimulus, the real sticking point was not the business relief aspect of it. It was unemployment and aid to state and local governments, not and how testing was going to work. It wasn't what a business owner what should happen with a business owner.
All right. Well, Joe, hopefully that helps. Next question is, where does the burden for forgiveness land? Does the bank ultimately answer to the feds, or if they say the loan is forgiven, is it a done deal? Good question.
Well, I mean, that goes back to why banks are worried because and why you haven't seen a lot of activity on the Main Street lending program, because it's somewhat similar in that, the bank, it's right now, the way everything reads is the bank says, thou shalt be forgiven. And then they get reimbursed by the SBA. Loan comes off the books, we're all square. So start taking a look at these $2 million loans, right? Well, what if I forgave one that the SBA subsequently audits and says, no, they didn't need the money? The hell happens then?
Yeah, and it's actually pretty clear, at least on paper, that if the bank has malfeasance or misfeasance, that they are responsible. The problem is that what exactly is their responsibility, and more importantly, the converse of that, what is their get out of jail card? Like, what are they not responsible for doing, which is what they're really more interested in. And so they want the feds to say, this is what you have to do. Here's your 10-point checklist. Check them off, and then forgiven. You put your signature on it that you did all 10 things, and you're done. Nothing more, nothing less. And they don't have that. And so until they get that, they're going to be very cautious about what they do with respect to forgiveness, because yes, the risk to them, unless they participated in the fraud, if there was one, is essentially they're not going to get paid their fee, and their cut essentially for and potentially be stuck with a loan. So all these potential consequences. So I don't think anybody's going to go to jail for that, but they're concerned obviously that they don't want to get stuck with these loans. They obviously want to get paid for processing them. And so where does that leave us? That leaves us with the ball, I think, in the federal government's court to say, here's the 10-point checklist. You submit it, you're good to go. No questions asked, no looking back.
All right. Any other questions? Nope. No, we've answered that one. You guys are quiet. I was thinking about doing a poll and saying I would love to get a poll from the 45 people that are still on this thing. Next week, are we still going to be in limbo? I would love to see what that poll is.
Send it out, post the survey, or seminar, Gary.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking of doing. Oh my goodness. Any other questions out there? I know there've got to be plenty of people wondering what is going on. You guys are usually really good about getting us good questions. And we know we can always count on David. That's usually a given. So thank you for that and for enlightening us on that. Love it. And Joe, you're pretty consistent too. So thanks for doing that. Anybody else out there? Robert, usually you weigh in. Toinette usually weigh in. But there's not a lot of new stuff to talk about other than that $2 million deal that came out.
That was really it.
Yeah.
There is, I failed to mention on the forms, there is, I read and I found it that both the for-profit and nonprofit forms are subject to approval by governmental agencies, and there's a 30-day comment period that ends on November 25th. So it's unlikely that PPP borrowers will receive the questionnaire before December at the earliest. So it sounds like it's out there floating, probably up for a comment by the banks, because as Adam said, that's the conduit for getting these forms. So it looks like maybe a post-Thanksgiving at the earliest that any borrowers would be receiving these forms to fill out. I am not aware of, and now it makes sense, of any borrowers that have received any documentation from the bank. So
Yeah. It's the gift that keeps on giving, Clark.
yes.
That's pretty funny. The other thing that we didn't bring up as well is that for anybody that's in the restaurant business, the state of North Carolina, I can't remember the name of the program off the top of my head. It's like MER or something like that, the Mortgage Rent Utilities Relief or whatever. But the state of North Carolina did come out with a grant application that I think came out today for $20,000 for full service restaurants to apply for to help out with rent and utilities or mortgage interest if you happen on the property. So just, another form of stimulus that's out there if you're a full service restaurant in the state of North Carolina.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, I would suggest that everyone on this call that is looking for money to check, maybe not on a daily basis, but every couple of days or so, there are new programs that come out, and the intentionality was there. It just took a while to get everything together. So I represent some organizations, some nonprofits that manage nonprofit money, and so there were contracts that had to be signed, and who was responsible for putting together the qualifying factors. Of course, who is responsible? I mean, this exact question we were just talking about is who's responsible for the vetting? Like for example, a Mecklenburg County program, who's responsible for the vetting of who is entitled to receive it? And then who is responsible for making sure that the right people get the money in the right amounts? And so the companies that I represent that are basically processing and doing the process in the application are saying, hey, look, you set up the criteria. We want our check the box form. That's what we do. And we tell you where to send the money. We don't even want the money to process. And so similarly, but some of those programs have recently come online, and I think there's more in the pipeline. So just please keep checking on the state level, on the local level, city and county, and also on the industry level, as you mentioned. So there is more money out there that is trickling. So don't think that, we're at the end of the possibilities, essentially.
We're going to have to do this polling thing more frequently because one, it's fun and interesting, but it's spurred a whole bunch of more questions. So here, and so far the results on the question, which is, will we still be in presidential election limbo next week? 90% have said yes. So
I would agree.
Oh my goodness. All right. So I'm going to close this poll down, at least from my screen. So the next question is supporting documentation required on under $50,000 PPPs using form 3508S?
So I don't, the purpose of doing the under 50 is to reduce the paper that is related to that. Now, having said that, it goes back to, do you need to do it now? Do you need to do it later? If you can wait, I just think that, now, especially with knowing the transition in the federal government, when it inevitably happens, that there will be changes. And so does that go all the way down to the 50K level, or does that, whatever the rules are now, stand for that? Which again, the intention is to reduce paperwork, reduce the hassle, assume that most people under 50,000 were to receive it legitimately. But those that were not entitled to it, or even the ones who committed fraud, yeah, okay, pennies on the dollar kind of thing, which, you know, obviously $50,000 is not insignificant, but in the scheme of things, we're talking about billions of dollars. So I would say that, you know, right now, I would hold tight until we know more, hopefully in the coming weeks, as to whether that's required still or not, or not required.
The only thing I'd add to that too, and this goes to what Jack and Adam have said really since day one, and that is have your documentation anyway. Because if these guys come back and decide that they're going to retroactively punish people, you know, which, I mean, just seeing this week, you never know. It's better to be prepared than to not. So that's all I'll say about that. Next question is, you may have addressed this earlier and I missed it, but what is the general thinking? Should we move forward with applying for forgiveness now or waiting to see what other changes are coming? What if your loan repayment due date is coming up soon?
I'll go in reverse order on that. If your loan payment due date is coming up soon, most of the banks that we've dealt with granted automatic extensions of time, which they were allowed to do with the HEROES Act. So the way that just as a refresher, the way that worked is if you got a loan after a certain date, you're automatically on a extended term. But if you had a loan before that, it was up to the bank. Most banks just said, "Thou shalt be extended," but some banks didn't. Mostly, I would suspect because it was an oversight. So the first thing I would do is I make sure that you're in communication with your lender, saying, "Hey, by the way, I want that extension thing. Let me know." If the answer to that is yes, you got granted the extension, there's no medal for being early, so I probably would wait.
All right. Next question is, I'm not trying to create problems, so it's difficult to ask questions. Our bank has sent documents to fill out online. We received over 150K. Started filling out the form, after answering the initial questions, it says we qualify for the easy form. I'm hung up on another question I need the bank to answer, so I couldn't move forward with application. However, this is not making sense to me. They received over 150K, but they're going with the easy. Well, I guess you can, right?
Remember, there's two easy forms. Easy form number one is called, "Hey, I didn't have any issues because I didn't reduce any heads," but that the loan could be unlimited. The other form is called below 50 grand. So in this case, what they're referencing is they clearly have answered the questions as if they didn't have any problems. I don't know what they'd be waiting for the bank for on that one, but it sounds like they didn't have any issues with the average FTE count or the way they spent the money.
So hopefully you've got a good banker that you've got a good relationship with that can navigate the machine of the bank. The bigger the bank, the more complex the machine is, it seems like. But next question is from
Yeah, Jack.
Oh.
Jack, you're saying a lot of great stuff, but you're on mute.
I'm sorry. I lost the mute button because I was looking at I went back to look at the 3508S to make sure that there wasn't something else in there. But, you know, it goes back to, and Gary just said it, which is, even if you don't have to provide the supporting documentation, what you're saying is that the documentation you provided in your loan application and in your forgiveness in your loan application is accurate and valid. You still need to act as if you need to provide all the documentation, because again, things will change. I don't think it'll change. I personally, this is a Jack theory, I don't think it'll change for the 50,000 and below, just because it's administratively a hassle to receive all this paper and have to go through it. And I think so that the banks that receive the documentation, the form, that is their checklist, essentially the 10-point checklist. And they say, all right, we received this. You federal government, if you have a problem, you go after the borrower, don't look at us, pay us our money for processing, and we're done. That is their get out of jail card, at least at this point. So I would say, again, reiterate, keep your documentation. You may not have to submit it, but please do keep your documentation.
All right, next question is from Marion. All this conversation has lost me. Well, we understand, and you're not alone, so that's okay. Is it okay to continue to wait for more clarification before we proceed with forgiveness for less than 50K?
Yeah, but if for no other reason, to not have it be taxable income in 2020.
Yeah, so hopefully that helps. Let's see. Yeah, we are at 88% to 12%. Will we still be in presidential election limbo next week? The people have spoken. It's a landslide. Oh my goodness. Anything else out there? We've been rocking through some good questions already and some amazing chats, thanks to David. Or do I have to launch another poll? Just try more questions. The question is, what 80s band will we be featuring next week? All right, so chat. Oh, this is great, but it assumes that the US government survives. Once we have 2 presidents, all bets are off. That is true. Hopefully the Republic will survive. We've been through some crazy times. If you look back in our history, we're kind of in those crazy times again. I remember in 2000 with the whole hanging Chad thing, I'm like, what is going on? And that was not all that long ago. It seemed like it wasn't long ago. But we'll see. At the end of the day, we still have businesses to run and things to get done. So, nobody on this call has been waiting around for the government to give them permission to go run their company or do whatever. So hats off to everybody that continues to be on these calls with us. We're trying to be here for you and make sure that you're not feeling alone in your own little world, because we're all in this thing together in one way or another. So John, it looks like John Meacham covers this in his most recent book regarding the soul of government. I have not read that. And I haven't read all of those books. Most of them I actually have, but I may have to add that one to my library. Thank you, Joe. Anything?
I thought that was a virtual background, so okay.
Yeah, that's not a virtual background. I need to start getting more creative with my backgrounds, though. I think I'm getting tired of this background. All right, any other thoughts, last thoughts from you guys or questions? Get it in before we're done, and we will still be back on the same bat channel next week, and we will see if the pollsters are correct or if you pollsters got it wrong like the rest of the media did. So we will be putting this broadcast up today, probably later, because I think Rachel's having some fun down in Florida with her family. So It'll probably be later, but it'll be up on the YouTube channel, BGW CPA YouTube channel. So thank you for everybody. Jack, any other parting thoughts?
Nope. I enjoyed doing this, but I hope that one of 2 things, that we're getting closer to the end of having the need to have these conversations, and maybe we switch up subjects and we do something else. But more importantly, that there's something substantive really to talk about next time. Right. And it's just unfortunate, but all we can do is give you what we know, and it's still a lot of speculation. So apologies, hopefully not in advance. Hopefully next week we have something really substantive to talk about.
Adam, any thoughts?
No, I would echo Jack's comments.
Yeah, the one thing that I would say too, just based on the comments that I've had from people, usually after the webinar or even via email, I think we'll probably want to keep doing something, but provide value. We were all kind of shocked into an issue where we're all in this, trying to make sense out of this morass at the same time. And because we do work with privately held businesses and their owners, you know, I think one of the biggest things that we can do, it would be keep ensuring that you guys are not alone out there. You know, just running a business is lonely anyway. And so if you guys have thoughts and topics that you think would be very interesting to you, that you can tap the big brains of both Adam and Jack, send them to me. gfry@trustbgw.com. That's what I would do. And because we're not going to keep doing these if they're not providing value, but if they are, we're certainly willing to do it. So just a thought. We'll look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thank you, Jack, again. I love the yellow, bright and sunny shirt that you're wearing in spite of this gray and gloomy day, but sunshine will be coming. We're not living in Ohio. So Adam, thank you again. Appreciate it. You guys have a wonderful day. Thank you everybody for being on here.
Thank
All
you.
right.
See y'all.
All right.